Your husband didn't die in the line of duty, Mrs. Martinez. My brother had him executed, and I have 4 years of proof locked in a federal vault, proof your David died, collecting proof that disappears forever if I bleed out in this alley tonight. Clara's hand was soaked in the man's blood. She should have screamed. She should have run. Instead, she pressed harder against his wound because something inside her recognized with a cold and terrible certainty that this bleeding stranger in the dark knew exactly how her husband had died. And he was the only person on earth who could prove it. If this story already has your heart in your throat, hit subscribe right now, turn on notifications, and follow Clara all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far she travels. Clara knew the exact time because she'd been watching the clock for 40 minutes, willing the night to end. Her feet had gone past, hurting into that hollow numbness that meant tomorrow morning would be brutal. 11 hours on linoleum, 4 years of 11-hour nights. She had stopped counting a long time ago. She wiped down the counter, stacked the sugar caddies, refilled the napkin holders even though nobody would eat breakfast here for another 5 hours, and Donna on the morning shift always restocked them anyway. It didn't matter. Her hands needed something to do. The moment her hands stopped moving, her brain started, and her brain was a neighborhood she didn't like walking through alone at night. Go home, Clara. Marge's voice floated through the pass-through. Seriously, it's almost 2. Almost done. You've been almost done for 30 years. Marge. I'm gone. Lock the back when you leave. The sound of the cook's locker slamming keys, jingling the heavy front door, groaning open and then shutting with a click that echoed through the empty diner. And then silence. Clara wrung out the rag, hung it, reached for her jacket, and heard something that stopped every thought in her head cold. Not a crash, not a voice. Something in between a low, dragging, wet sound like something heavy being moved against concrete. It came from the alley. It came again. And buried inside it unmistakably was the specific quality of a human being trying to breathe through something that wasn't air. Clara knew that sound. She had heard it once before in a hospital corridor, and she had spent 4 years trying to unhear it. Her hand was already on the back door before she made any conscious decision. The alley was dark except for the reach of the street lamp at the far end, which threw just enough yellow light to show her the shape of him, a man large propped sideways against the dumpster, with one arm wrapped tight around his own midsection. His coat was dark and expensive, which struck her as an absurd thing to notice. His silver hair was plastered against his forehead. His eyes were half open, fixed on something above him. She said, "Hey," and his eyes dropped to her face like a pair of anchors. And then his hands shot out and locked around her wrist. "Don't," she started. "David Martinez," he said. Clara stopped breathing. "Your husband," the man rasped. His voice was low, accented European. She thought something underneath the American polish. "David Martinez, undercover detective badge number 4471, signed it to organized crime unit, went dark 4 years ago, February." His grip on her wrist didn't loosen. "I need you to hear me out before you scream or run or call anyone. Please, I have maybe 90 seconds before I lose the ability to explain this clearly, and you deserve a clear explanation." Clara's mouth was open. No sound was coming out. "Who are you?" she finally managed. It came out as a whisper. "Adrian Moretti." The name hit her like a hand across the face. She knew that name. She knew it the way every person in this city knew it, through newspaper headlines and police scanner rumors, and the particular hush that fell over certain conversations when certain families were mentioned. 3 generations of Morettis had run the shadow economy of this city. Clubs construction, city contracts that materialized from nowhere, bodies that disappeared the same way. The eldest son, Adrian, had vanished from public life roughly 3 years ago. There had been theories. Dead, fled, turned, and now he was bleeding on the asphalt behind her diner, saying her dead husband's name. "Let go of my wrist," Clara said. "Sojos?" "Yes." He released her immediately. She hadn't expected that. She took a step back. He didn't move, didn't reach for her again, just watched her with those clear, pain-sharpened eyes that were tracking her the way a man tracks the only exit in a room. "If you're Adrian Moretti, you need a hospital," she said. "And then you need to talk to the police, not a waitress." Local PD has 2 officers on my brother's payroll. I don't know which ones. A pause for a controlled breath. If I go to the wrong person tonight, I'm dead before morning. And everything I've been building for the past 3 years disappears with me. What does any of that have to do with David? Adrian Moretti looked at her for a moment that felt like a full minute. Your husband didn't die in a botched robbery, Mrs. Martinez. You know that. The department eventually told you he was undercover. He paused. What they didn't tell you, what they couldn't tell you, because they didn't know, is that David had found something enormous. Documentation of payments, communications, names of officials, enough to collapse not just my brother's operation, but the network of city government that's been protecting him for 20 years. His jaw tightened. Vico found out what David had. Not who he was, what he had. He moved against him 3 days before David was going to hand everything to his department. The world had a strange quality to it. Clara was aware of the cold, the smell of the dumpster, the distant sound of a car several blocks away, everything too sharp and too distant at the same time. How do you know any of this? She said. Because David gave the evidence to me. Silence. Before Vico moved against him, Adrian continued steady and relentless. David came to me, privately. He told me his cover might be blown. He told me he was afraid he wasn't going to make it to the handoff. And he gave me everything. He'd collected 4 months of documentation, and he asked me to make sure it survived, even if he didn't. That's not, Clara's voice cracked. She stopped, swallowed, started again. Why would he trust you? I know what I am. Adrian didn't flinch. David had spent almost 2 years inside my brother's organization. He was smart enough and observant enough to understand that Vico and I were not the same man. He said to me, another careful breath, the effort it cost him was visible. He said, I don't have anyone else, and you have enough conscience left to finish this. I can see it. Clara pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. For 4 years, she said when she trusted her voice again. You've had his evidence for 4 years. Yes. And you said nothing. You came to no one. I went to the FB. His voice was quiet but firm. 18 months ago, everything David collected is now part of a federal case file. The investigation has been running for 1.5 years. We are 6 weeks from a grand jury. He held her gaze. I didn't come to you sooner because doing so before the case was sealed would have put you and your son directly in my brother's crosshairs. I've been trying to protect you. You don't get to decide that, Clara said, and her voice came out harder than she expected, cracked through with something that was equal parts grief and fury. You don't get to sit on 4 years of my life and call it protecting me. No, Adrian said simply. You're right, I don't. She hadn't expected him to agree. It knocked the next words out of her. He said, help me inside. Let me give you the number for my federal's contact. Call her, verify everything I've told you, and then decide what you do next. That's all I'm asking. A pause, but you don't owe me anything. I'm aware of that. Clara looked at him. The blood was soaking through his coat. She could see the dark spread of it. He wasn't exaggerating the wound. If she walked away and called 911, he might live, or he might not, depending on how long the ambulance took, and whether the wrong officer responded to the call. If he was telling the truth about Vico's reach into local PD, calling 911 was a coin flip with his life. And if he was lying about all of it, David's evidence, the federal case, all of it, then she was about to let a Moretti crime boss through her back door. David came to me. He said, I don't have anyone else. Can you stand? She said. Something moved across Adrian Moretti's face. Not smugness, not relief, even something rawer than that. The look of a man who had not been sure right up until the second that anyone was ever going to help him again. With assistance, he said, then we're going to stand up slowly, Clara said, moving to his right side. And you're going to keep that arm pressed exactly where it is, and if you pass out in my back hallway, I am absolutely calling 911 and letting God sort it out. Understood. And you're going to tell me everything. Every single thing you know, starting from the beginning. Yes. And if I find out you're lying to me, she got her shoulder under his arm, felt the full terrible weight of him, and straightened. I don't know what I'll do, but it won't be quiet. I believe you, Adrian Moretti said. And she thought he meant it. Getting him through the back door and into the storage room was 6 minutes of controlled nightmare. He was large and he was hurt, and he was trying, she could feel him trying not to put his full weight on her, which paradoxically made it harder. "Stop being polite and lean," she told him through her teeth. He leaned. She sat him on the flour sacks, went for the first aid kit under the register, came back to find him with his coat already open, studying his own wound, the way a mechanic studies an engine problem, analytical, unsentimental. "Left side," he said, "through and through, missed everything vital." "You sound very confident about that." "I've been shot before." Clara crouched in front of him, opened the kit, and began pulling out gauze. "That's not the reassurance you think it is." "Fair." She pressed the folded gauze against the wound. His breath pulled sharp, but he made no other sound. She secured it with tape, working quickly, hands steady, the way they'd been steady in the worst moments of her life. She had always had steady hands in crises. The falling apart came later, privately, when there was no one watching. "The federal agent," she said, not looking up from her work. "What's her name?" "Reyes, Diana Reyes. Her number is in my left coat pocket. She has been my handler for the entire operation." He paused. She also knew David, not personally, but she reviewed every piece of documentation he collected. She told me once that it was some of the most meticulous undercover work she had seen in 15 years. Clara's jaw tightened. "Don't. I thought you'd want. I know what he was. I don't need you to tell me." She pressed harder than necessary on the gauze and watched him absorb it without complaint. "What I need you to tell me is why tonight. Why did Vico's men find you tonight, specifically?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, awaited quiet. "He knows the case is closing," he said finally. "Someone inside the federal task force leaked. Not Reyes, she's clean. Someone further up the chain. Vico knows a grand jury is 6 weeks out. He's been hunting me for 2 months. His voice didn't change. "Tonight they got lucky. I was meeting an associate 3 blocks from here. They were waiting." A pause. "I ran. This alley was where I stopped." Clara sat back on her heels. The math arranged itself with horrible clarity. If Vico's men had been watching the street, if they had seen her come outside, if they had watched her help him through the door. "They saw me," she said. It wasn't a question, a beat of silence that confirmed it more completely than any answer could. "Possibly," Adrian said. "Possibly. I don't know how many men were on the street. I was moving fast. It's possible no one saw the door. It's possible." "So, Mr. Moretti?" Her voice was flat and very quiet. "My son is 9 years old." The sentence landed in the room like a stone into water. Adrian Moretti stopped speaking. He looked at her, really looked at her the way people rarely did, the kind of look that sees the full weight a person is carrying, and something in his expression shifted into something she could only describe as genuine. "Reyes can put you in protective custody," he said. "Both of you, tonight if necessary. It will disrupt your life considerably, but you'll be safe. And the case goes forward, with or without me making it through the night." His eyes were steady. "David's work doesn't disappear again. I can promise you that. It's already in federal hands. Nothing Vico does to me changes that now." Clara looked at this man, silver-haired and bleeding, and telling her the truth about her husband in a storage room that smelled of coffee and floor cleaner in the middle of the night 4 years too late. "One question," she said. "Then I call." "Yes." At the end, before Vico moved against him. She kept her voice even and measured it out word by word. "Was David afraid?" Adrian Moretti looked at her for a long, careful moment. And then he said something she had not expected him to say. "He was, but not for himself." A pause. "He told me he had a wife and a son. He said if this goes wrong, I need someone to make sure it meant something. He said his boy was 5 years old, and he wanted someday, when the boy was old enough, he wanted him to know that his father's work mattered." He held her gaze without looking away. "He was thinking about you, both of you, right up until the moment he walked out of that room." Clara reached into Adrian Moretti's coat pocket and pulled out the card. "Special Agent Diana Reyes, a number. Nothing else." Her hand did not shake. She was proud of her hand. She dialed. 1 ring, 2, 3. "Reyes, sharp, alert. A woman who answered her phone at 2 a.m. because she expected calls exactly like this one. My name is Clara Martinez. Her voice was steady and clear, and she meant every word of it. I'm at Rosie's Diner, 5th and Clement. I have Adrian Moretti. He's wounded. He's conscious. He says you'll know what to do. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 4 seconds. Don't open the door for anyone, Agent Reyes said, and her voice had dropped into something fast and operational and very certain. Not police, not paramedics, nobody, until I knock 3 times and identify myself. Do you understand where I am? Yes. I'm 11 minutes out. You did the right thing calling. The line went dead. Clara lowered the phone, looked at Adrian Moretti, who was watching her with those clear, exhausted eyes, looked at the door. Listened to the specific quality of the silence outside the city. Breathing cars blocks away the ordinary sounds of a night that had stopped being ordinaries the moment she'd heard a sound in an alley and followed it. 11 minutes. She sat down on a crate across from him, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. Leo's face was in her mind, his sleeping face, the way he breathed through his mouth, the small, particular weight of him when she carried him from the couch to his bed. She held that image and did not let it go. Across from her, Adrian Moretti closed his eyes, leaned his head back against the shelving, and let out a long, slow exhale. The sound of a man setting down something he had carried alone for a very long time. 11 minutes. She could do 11 minutes. Outside, the city hummed its indifferent nighttime hum. And somewhere across town, in a room where plans were being made and orders were being given, a man named Vico Moretti was learning exactly whose alley his brother had crawled into. The 11 minutes felt like 11 years. Clara sat on that crate with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on the back door and her mind doing the thing it always did under pressure, going somewhere else entirely. Going to Leo. Leo asleep at Rosa's apartment across town, mouth open, one arm hanging off the side of the mattress, the way it always did, the way David used to sleep, the same loose-limbed, unconscious sprawl that had made her heart ache from the first night she'd noticed it. Leo, who did not know that his mother was sitting in a storage room with a bleeding Moretti waiting for a federal agent, 11 minutes away from whatever came next. She had not told him much about his father. He had been 5 when David died. What she had told him was true. His father was brave. His father loved him. His father was a hero. She had not told him the rest because she hadn't known the rest. Because the department had given her a folded flag and a commendation and a very careful, very official silence. Now sitting across from the man who had been carrying her husband's secrets for 4 years, she wondered what she was going to say to a 9-year-old boy who was old enough to start asking harder questions. You have a look on your face, Adrian said quietly. She didn't answer. You're thinking about your son. Stop doing that, Clara said. Doing what? Well, no. Reading me. She met his eyes. You don't know me. No, he agreed. I don't. He shifted slightly, and the effort it cost him was visible in the tight line of his jaw. David talked about you. Not often. He was careful, but sometimes. A pause. He said you were the steadiest person he had ever known, that nothing knocked you down permanently. He said you always, his exact words, got back up cleaner than you fell. Clara looked at the door. He was wrong. I don't think so. You've known me for 20 minutes, Mr. Moretti. And in those 20 minutes, you've helped a bleeding crime boss through a back door, dressed his wound, called a federal agent, and sat across from him without once completely falling apart. He held her gaze. David wasn't wrong. She was about to answer when 3 knocks hit the back door in a sharp, deliberate sequence. Clara was on her feet before the 3rd knock finished. Her heart hammered once hard against her ribs. Reyes, said a voice through the door. Clipped. Professional. Diana Reyes, FBI. You called me Mrs. Martinez. Clara looked at Adrian. He gave one short nod. She opened the door. Diana Reyes was not what Clara had expected, and Clara couldn't have said exactly what she had expected, but it wasn't this, a woman in her mid-40s, compact and quick-eyed, wearing a dark jacket over a sweater badge clipped into her belt, no visible weapon, but the absolute certainty in her posture that said weapon was somewhere close. She was inside the door and had it shut behind her in under 2 seconds. She swept the room once, cataloged everything, and then her eyes landed on Adrian. You look terrible, she said. Thank you, Diana. Who knows you're here? No one. Possibly no one. He glanced at Clara. We're uncertain. Reyes turned to Clara. The full weight of her attention was considerable. You're the waitress who called. I'm the waitress who helped him inside. My name is Clara Martinez. Something shifted in Reyes's expression. A fractional change recognition, and beneath it, something careful. David Martinez's wife. Widow, Clara said. A beat of silence that meant something Clara couldn't quite read. He told you who he is, Reyes said, gesturing at Adrian without looking at him. He told me everything, Clara said. Or what sounds like everything. I'd like to hear your version. Reyes studied her for a moment with those quick, assessing eyes. Then she said, all right, but first, Adrian, I need to know exactly where you were when they found you, who made contact, and how many shooters. 3 blocks east corner of Clement and 9th, 2 men, 1 shooter. The other was a spotter. I made the spotter first, but by the time I moved, the shooter had already. You walked into a planned ambush. Yes, which means they had eyes on your associate's location. Reyes's voice was flat and controlled, but underneath it, Clara could hear something that wasn't quite anger. It was worse than anger. It was the sound of a carefully constructed operation developing a crack. How long have you been meeting at that location? 3 weeks. Too long. She pulled out her phone, typed something rapidly. I'm calling in a unit to run the block. If they're still watching the area, we'll know in 10 minutes. She looked up. The car I drove is clean, registered to a shell that Vico's people have never touched. But if someone saw this door... I know, Adrian said. Then we may need to move you tonight. I'm aware, Cité. And her. Reyes turned back to Clara, not unkindly but without any softening, either the look of someone who delivered difficult realities as a professional practice. Mrs. Martinez, if anyone in Vico's crew connected you to Adrian tonight, your address is compromised by morning. Possibly sooner. Clara had known this was coming, had been knowing it since the moment she'd understood that Vico's men might have seen the door. It still landed like a fist in the sternum. My son, she said. He's across town. My sister's apartment. Address, Clara gave it. Reyes typed it without hesitation. I'll have someone sit on the building tonight. Non-uniformed. Your sister won't know they're there. She paused. Is there anyone else, family, close friends, who might be used as leverage? The word leverage in the context of her family made Clara's vision sharpen in a way that was almost physical. My mother, she's in Phoenix. She's out of it. She doesn't. She's fine then. Geographic distance helps. Reyes slid the phone into her pocket. Now, what exactly did Adrian tell you? Clara told her. All of it, David's evidence, the handoff, the 4 years, the federal case, 6 weeks from a grand jury. She told it flatly and in order, the way she'd learned to recount things that mattered, leaving out the parts that were only feelings. Reyes listened without interrupting once. Adrian watched Clara while she talked, and she was aware of him watching, and she didn't look at him. When she finished, Reyes was quiet for 3 full seconds. Then she said, He told you the truth. I know, Clara said. You know, I could tell. She looked at Reyes directly. But I needed to hear you say it. Reyes almost smiled. It was a small, controlled, involuntary thing there, and gone in under a second. Your husband's documentation forms the backbone of our case, Mrs. Martinez. Without what David collected, we have a strong circumstantial case against Vico Moretti. With it, we have a conviction. She paused. He was exceptional at what he did. I want you to know that from me directly, not from a commendation letter. He was genuinely exceptional. Clara's throat closed. She nodded once because nodding was all she had. I have a question, she said when she could. The leak. Adrian said someone inside the task force told Vico the grand jury was 6 weeks out. If there's a leak, how safe is David's evidence? The quality of the silence that followed told Clara she had landed on exactly the right nerve. Reyes and Adrian looked at each other. A fast-loaded exchange. That's what I was coming to, Reyes said. Clara went still. Tell me. Reyes pulled a chair from against the wall and sat down, which told Clara this was going to take a minute. The leak is real. We identified it 8 days ago. The compromised individual has been feeding Vico's operation partial information for approximately 4 months. Not the full case file, but enough. Case timeline, witness list, structure, general parameters of the evidence. She paused. The individual has been quietly suspended, and we've been feeding them controlled misinformation since we identified them. They don't know we know. But Vico has already acted on what they told him, Clara said. He's been hunting Adrian for 2 months. Yes. So the evidence is secure, Reyes said. What the leak couldn't give Vico is the physical location of the evidence archive. That's compartmentalized at a level above the leak's clearance. The files are safe. A beat. What's not safe is the witnesses chain. The leak exposed enough of the witness structure that Vico has been able to identify. She stopped. How many? Adrian said quietly. It wasn't a question. Reyes looked at him. 2 in the past 6 weeks. Both were found before they were approached, so how many were approached? Another pause. Longer. 1 couldn't be reached in time, Reyes said. Marco Pellini, 3 weeks ago. The name hit Adrian like a physical blow. Clara watched it happen, watched him absorb it, contain it, go very still, the way people go still when they are managing something that would otherwise be unmanageable. Marco was 61 years old, Adrian said. He had grandchildren. I know. Reyes's voice was quiet. I'm sorry, Adrian. When were you going to tell me? Tonight. At the meeting I was trying to arrange before you ended up in this alley. She held his gaze. The operation is still sound. Marco's testimony, while valuable, was corroborating, not foundational. The case survives without it. But it means Vico is moving faster than we projected, and the 6-week timeline may need to compress. How compressed? Clara asked. Both of them looked at her. She had the distinct impression they had briefly forgotten she was there. She was glad she had reminded them. We're looking at potentially moving to grand jury in 3 weeks instead of 6, Reyes said. But that creates its own risks, rushed preparation, less time to... She stopped herself, recalibrated. Mrs. Martinez, I want to be honest with you. Tonight has changed the calculus of this operation. Adrian being found, the possible exposure of your involvement, these are variables we weren't accounting for. What does that mean practically? It means we need to make some decisions quickly. She looked at Clara steadily. And one of those decisions involves you. Clara did not like the sound of that. What kind of decision? Reyes leaned forward slightly. The prosecutor on this case has been trying to find a way to humanize David Martinez for the jury. Right now, David is a name on a case file. A brave officer, yes, but abstract, distant. The jury needs to feel what was lost. She paused. You are what was lost, Mrs. Martinez. You and Leo. Clara felt the air in the room change temperature. You want me to testify, she said. I want you to consider it. There's a significant difference. Reyes's voice was careful and measured. You would not be testifying about the crime itself. You have no direct knowledge of it. You'd be testifying to the impact. What David's death did to your family. What 4 years of uncertainty looks like from the inside. A pause. It would also very practically mean that you and Leo would be under official federal protection from the moment you agreed, rather than the informal arrangement we'd be scrambling to put together tonight. The offer was rational. The offer was logical. The offer made complete strategic sense. And the offer asked her to stand in front of a courtroom and describe in public under oath what the worst 4 years of her life had felt like. I need to think about it, Clara said. Of course. And I need to talk to Leo. He's old enough to be part of this decision. He's 9, Reyes said gently. He's 9 and he's David's son. And if his life is about to get turned upside down because of his father's work, he deserves to know why. Clara's voice did not waver. That's not negotiable. A beat of silence. Then Reyes nodded. All right. Tonight, Clara continued, what happens tonight? Tonight you're coming with me. Both of you will stop at your sister's, collect Leo without alarming anyone, and you'll go to a safe location while we assess the exposure level. She stood. I have a vehicle outside. We move in 5 minutes. Clara stood, picked up her jacket from where she dropped it, and then stopped. Adrian, she said. He looked at her. There was exhaustion in his face now, the wound and the adrenaline and the accumulated weight of years all settling into his features at once. He looked, she thought, like a man who had been keeping himself together through sheer will and was reaching the limit of what will could do. David trusted you, she said, and you kept what he gave you. You built the case. She held his gaze. That's not nothing. I want you to know I understand that's not nothing. He said very quietly, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She turned toward the door. "Finish the job first." She was halfway to the door when her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Her thumb hovered. She answered. The voice on the other end was male, low, unhurried. The voice of a man who had never in his life been in a hurry, because men like him did not need to rush. Things came to them. "Mrs. Martinez," said the voice, "my name is Vico Moretti. I believe you have something of mine." Clara stopped walking. Every muscle in her body went rigid. She did not speak. She knew some instinct, some deep, cold understanding that speaking first was wrong. She waited. "You're a smart woman," Vico continued. "My people tell me that about you. Hardworking, devoted to your son." A pause, deliberately comfortable. "I have no argument with you, Mrs. Martinez. I have an argument with my brother. These are two very different things." Clara's eyes cut to Reyes, who had crossed the room in 3 steps and was already gesturing. "Keep him talking. Keep him talking." "What do you want?" Clara said. Her voice came out level. She did not know how. "I want my brother to walk out of wherever he's hiding and have a conversation with me directly like a man, instead of bleeding on civilians and creating complications." His voice didn't change. It had the quality of someone conducting a routine transaction. "You have no stake in this, Mrs. Martinez. Your husband made choices that had consequences. Painful ones. I understand that. But those consequences are finished. What's happening now doesn't need to touch you." "You're threatening me," Clara said. "I'm explaining options," Vico said pleasantly. "There's an option where my brother and I resolve our disagreement privately, and you go back to your life, and your son goes back to school on Monday morning, and this entire unpleasant evening simply never happened." The pleasant tone didn't shift at all. "And there's another option. I would prefer not to discuss the other option." Reyes was on her own phone now, turned away, speaking in rapid, low bursts. Adrian had gotten to his feet, which had clearly cost him something, and was watching Clara's face. "How did you get this number?" Clara asked. She needed 30 more seconds. She didn't know why 30 seconds, but she felt that she needed to keep him talking. "Mrs. Martinez," almost amused, "I've had your number for 4 years. I've had your address, your sister's address, your son's school schedule." A pause, and in the pause was something that turned her blood to ice water. "I've never used any of it, because you were never relevant to my business. I want you to understand that I have always had the ability to make your life very difficult, and I have never chosen to do so." Another pause. "I'm asking you politely to help me continue not choosing that." Reyes turned back, held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. "Tell your brother you called," Clara said. A beat. "I'm sorry. Tell your brother yourself. He's right here." She crossed the room in 4 steps and put the phone in Adrian Moretti's hand. For one single suspended second, no one in the room moved. Adrian looked at the phone, looked at Clara, and then he raised it to his ear. "Vico," he said. What came from the other end of the phone, even across the room, even muffled through the speaker, was not a voice anymore. It was something past language. A sound a man makes when the architecture of his plan collapses in a single moment, when the variable he hadn't accounted for turns out to be everything. "You have no idea," Adrian said quietly into the phone, "how long I've waited to say this to you directly. It's over. The case closes with or without me. It closes with or without you finding me tonight. David Martinez built something that cannot be dismantled, and I made sure of it." A pause. "Don't call this number again." He ended the call, handed the phone back to Clara. In the ringing silence, Reyes said, "We need to move, right now." Clara put the phone in her pocket. Her hand was shaking now finally, now that it was over. Now that the moment had passed, and she was dimly glad she'd managed to hold it together long enough. She thought of Leo. She thought of David saying, "I need someone," to make sure it meant something. She thought about Monday morning and school schedules and the completely insane fact that 20 minutes ago, she had been wiping down a diner counter. "Let's go," she said. And they went. The ride across town was 12 minutes of silence and moving darkness, and Clara staring out the window at the city that had taken her husband and given her nothing back for 4 years. Reyes drove. Adrian sat in the back beside Clara, saying nothing, his breathing controlled and steady. Clara's phone stayed dark. Vico didn't call again. At Rosa's apartment building, Reyes pulled to the curb. "Stay in the car," she said to Adrian. To Clara, "Make it fast. Tell your sister as little as possible. Family emergency. You need Leo for a few days. You'll explain everything later. The less she knows tonight, the safer she is." Clara nodded, got out, walked to the building door. She pressed the buzzer, waited, pressed again. Rosa's voice came through the intercom, thick with sleep. "Who is it?" "It's me. Let me in. I need Leo." A pause. "Clara, it's 2:40 in the morning." "I know. Buzz me and Rosa. Please." The door clicked open. Standing in the elevator with the floor numbers ticking upward, Clara worked out what she was going to say, and how she was going to say it, and how she was going to look her sister in the eye and be ordinary enough that Rosa didn't panic. She had 30 seconds. She had been making 30 seconds work for 4 years. She could do it one more time. The elevator opened. Rosa was standing in her apartment doorway in her bathrobe, hair loose, arms crossed, face arranged into the particular expression that older sisters reserve for younger sisters who show up at 2 a.m. with no explanation. "What happened?" Rosa said. "Family thing. I can't explain tonight." Clara moved past her into the apartment. "Where's Leo?" "He's asleep, Clara. It's the middle of the—" "I need him. I need to take him with me." She was already moving toward the hallway. "Clara!" Rosa grabbed her arm. Her voice had changed. The sister annoyance was gone, replaced by something sharper. "You look like you've been crying. Your jacket has blood on the sleeve. What is going on?" Clara stopped, looked down at her sleeve. Adrian's blood. She had forgotten. She looked up at her sister, at Rosa's dark, worried eyes, at the face that looked so much like their mother's, at the person who had sat with her on the bathroom floor the night David died, and when she couldn't get up, and she made a calculation. "I can't tell you right now," Clara said. "I need you to trust me for 48 hours. Can you do that?" Rosa stared at her for a long moment. "Is Leo safe?" she said. "He will be. The moment I get him, he will be." Another moment. Then Rosa released her arm and stepped back. 48 hours, she said, "and then you tell me everything." "Everything," Clara promised. She went to the bedroom. Leo was sprawled exactly as she'd imagined him, one arm hanging off the mattress, mouth open, completely unconscious. She stood there for 3 seconds, just looking at him, just breathing. Then she touched his shoulder gently. "Leo, hey buddy, wake up." He stirred, blinked, found her face in the dark with the unerring instinct children have for their mothers. "Mom." "Hi baby, I need you to come with me." Now, his voice was blurry with sleep. "It's nighttime." "I know, I'll explain in the car." She was already pulling him upright, reaching for his shoes. "We're going on a little trip, okay, like an adventure." Leo, with the magnificent adaptability of children, accepted this with only a brief furrowed brow. "Is it a good adventure or a scary one?" Clara laced his left shoe, then his right. She looked up at her son's face, David's face, so much David's face, and she said, "I don't know yet, but we're going to be okay either way." "How do you know?" She stood up, held out her hand. "Because we always are," she said. He took her hand without question, the way he always did, the way she hoped he always would, even when he was too old and too proud to reach for it in public. She led him down the hall past Rosa, who was standing very still in the kitchen doorway, watching them go out the apartment door and into the elevator and down to the street, where a federal agent sat in a clean car with a wounded Moretti in the back seat. Leo stopped on the sidewalk and stared at the car. "Mom, it's them," he said. "Who are those people?" Clara looked at the car, at Reyes watching through the windshield with those sharp, patient eyes, at the shape of Adrian in the back head, leaning against the window, eyes closed. "Friends," she said. And then, because Leo had David's eyes and David's instinct for truth, people who knew your father, who are helping us because of him. Leo processed this with the gravity that 9-year-olds apply to things they sense are important. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. Clara took a breath. Thought about Adrian's voice saying he was thinking about you right up until the end. Thought about David in a room somewhere 4 years ago, handing over his evidence, asking a Moretti to keep it safe. Thought about what it meant to keep going, to get back up cleaner than you fell to do the right thing at 2 a.m. in an alley when everything inside you was telling you to walk away. Not if I can help it, she said. She opened the car door. They got in. Reyes pulled into traffic without a word. The city slid past the windows, dark and bright and indifferent, the way cities always are, enormous and ongoing, full of people who had no idea what was happening in the car moving through their streets. In the back seat, Leo leaned against Clara's arm and was asleep again in 4 minutes. She felt the weight of him settle against her, warm and real, and hers, and she put one hand on top of his head and looked out the window and did not think about anything except keeping that weight exactly where it was. Adrian watched her do it. And for a man who had made a career of seeing things clearly, it was, he thought, the clearest thing he had seen in a very long time. They drove for 40 minutes before Reyes pulled off the main road. Clara didn't ask where they were going. She had made the decision to trust this woman the moment she'd opened that back door, and second-guessing it now in a moving car with her son asleep against her shoulder and a wounded Moretti beside her was not going to help anyone. So she watched the city thin out around them, the lights getting farther apart, the buildings getting lower, and she held Leo's weight against her and she breathed. Reyes pulled into the parking structure of what looked like an ordinary mid-range hotel, drove to the 3rd level and parked in a corner slot room out away from the elevator. She turned the engine off and sat for a moment with both hands still on the wheel. "3rd floor, room 312, she said. "It's been booked under a cover name for 6 weeks. Adrian, you know the protocol." "Yes," Adrian said. "Mrs. Martinez, I need your phone." Clara looked up. "Excuse me." "Your personal phone. Not permanently, I'll have a burner for you inside, but your registered number is now compromised. Vico called it directly, which means he's had it flagged. Anything you do on that phone from this point forward, he can potentially see." She held out her hand. "I know it's uncomfortable." Uncomfortable was not the word. Clara's entire life was on that phone: Leo's school contact, Rosa's number, her work schedule, the photos. 4 years of photos. She looked at the black screen for a moment. Then she put it in Reyes's hand. "I want it back," she said. "You'll get it back." Reyes pocketed it. "Let's go." Leo woke up when Clara shifted him off her shoulder, blinked at the parking structure with the vague suspicion of a child who has been moved without consent, and said, "Are we at a hotel?" "For a little while," Clara said. "Do they have a pool?" "Leo, I'm just asking." Adrian made a sound that under other circumstances might have been a laugh. Clara shot him a look. He composed his face. Room 312 was clean, anonymous, and had 2 beds and a pull-out sofa, which told Clara that Reyes had anticipated more than one occupant at some point. There was a laptop on the desk, a duffel bag in the closet, and a medical kit on the bathroom counter that was considerably more comprehensive than the first aid box at Rosie's. Leo stood in the middle of the room and assessed it with the thoroughness of a property inspector. "It's okay," he concluded. "The TV's big." "Go pick something to watch," Clara said. "Keep the volume low." He climbed onto the far bed without argument, the specific cooperation of a child who can sense that the adults in the room are managing something large and has decided instinctively to make himself small. He found the remote. The TV came on quietly. Clara turned to Reyes. "Now," she said. "All of it. Everything you haven't told me yet." Reyes set her bag on the desk and pulled out a folder. Not a digital file paper, the old-fashioned kind, which meant it was the kind of information someone had decided shouldn't exist on a server. "Sit down, Mrs. Martinez." "I'd rather stand." Reyes looked at her for a beat. "All right." She opened the folder. "The Moretti case has been the primary focus of this task force for 3 years. Vico Moretti is connected to 11 confirmed homicides, 4 of which involve law enforcement. He controls approximately 40% of the city's illicit revenue streams and has direct relationships with officials in the city planning department, the district attorney's office, and until 8 months ago, the deputy chief of police." "Until 8 months ago," Clara repeated. "Deputy Chief Harlan retired unexpectedly in March." "Health reasons officially." Well, Reyes' voice was neutral in the specific way of someone who knows exactly what the truth is and is choosing careful words. "He is currently cooperating with our investigation in exchange for a reduced exposure agreement." "Harlan," Clara said. She knew that name. The whole city knew that name. He had spoken at David's memorial. He had shaken her hand and told her David was a hero and looked her in the eye the entire time. "He was at my husband's funeral." "Yes." The silence in the room had a particular texture. On the other bed, Leo had found a nature documentary and was watching something about ocean animals with the focused serenity of a child temporarily removed from adult reality. Clara was grateful for ocean animals. Was Harlan involved in David's death? Her voice came out level. She was proud of it. Reyes and Adrian exchanged the same look they'd exchanged in the storage room. The fast-loaded look of two people who had discussed something at length and reached a decision about how much to say. He knew, Reyes said carefully. He didn't order it, but he knew Vico was moving against an undercover officer, and he made the decision not to intervene. Clara put her hand on the back of the desk chair. Not to sit, just to have something solid under her palm. He let it happen, she said. Yes. And then he came to my husband's funeral and shook my hand. Yes. She stood there for a moment with that fact sitting on her chest. Then she said, that his testimony part of the case, it's a significant part. Good. She released the chair. What else? Reyes hesitated, and Reyes Clara had already understood was not a woman who hesitated without reason. The hesitation itself was information. There's something specific to you that you need to know, Reyes said. Something that wasn't in Adrian's version because Adrian didn't know until 2 days ago. Adrian went very still on the sofa where he'd lowered himself carefully, coat still on one arm braced against his side. What didn't I know 2 days ago, he said. Reyes looked at him directly. David didn't only give you the evidence file, Adrian. He made a second copy, a backup. He gave it to someone else, someone inside the department he trusted with instructions to come forward if he didn't make it to the handoff. She paused. That person held onto it for 4 years. They were afraid. After the leak inside our task force became apparent, they reached out to me directly through a back channel 10 days ago. The room was completely quiet except for the television murmuring about deep-sea creatures. Who? Clara asked. A detective named Frank Okafor. He was David's partner for 18 months before the undercover assignment. They were close. Reyes's voice was careful. Frank has been living with this for 4 years. He came forward because the grand jury timeline means if he doesn't act now, the window closes. Clara knew that name too. Frank Okafor had come to the funeral. He had been one of the pallbearers. He had sat 2 rows behind her, and she had heard him crying the specific, almost silent crying of a large man trying not to be heard, and she had thought at the time that he must have loved David very much. She had been right, just not in the way she'd understood. He's been carrying this for 4 years, Clara said slowly, and he said nothing to me. He was protecting you. Same reasoning as Adrian. If Vico knew Okafor had a copy of the evidence, he would have assumed Okafor had shared it with David's widow. It would have put you directly in the crosshairs. Reyes met her eyes. I know that doesn't make it easier. No, Clara said. It doesn't, she breathed. Where is Frank now? Safe house, other side of the city. He's been with us for 4 days. Reyes paused. He wants to see you, he asked specifically. I told him I would pass the request along, and the decision was entirely yours. Clara looked at the folder on the desk, at the careful official reality of what her husband's death had actually been. Not a dark street, not a random violent end, but a calculated decision made in a comfortable office by a man who then came to the funeral and shook her hand. She looked at that and she made herself hold it the way she had learned to hold unbearable things, without flinching and without looking away. I'll see him, she said, not tonight, but I'll see him. Reyes nodded, closed the folder, and then her phone buzzed, and she looked at the screen, and her expression changed in a way that was very small and very significant. What? Adrian said. Reyes turned the phone so he could see the screen. He read whatever was on it. His jaw set. What is it? Clara said. My team ran the block where Adrian was shot tonight, Reyes said. We found the spotters position a car parked on the corner. Plates came back to a Shell registration. She paused. We also found a second car. Different position. Further back. Another pause. That car is registered through 4 layers of Shell companies to a logistics firm that's been a known Moretti front for 6 years. That's not surprising, Clara said. No, but the second car had been there since 11 p.m., 2 hours before Adrian's meeting. Reyes looked at her steadily. The meeting wasn't leaked from the task force. Someone told Vico's people about that location in advance. Someone who knew where Adrian was going to be specifically well before the task force would have had that information. She paused. Which means the leak isn't inside my operation. Then where is it? Clara said. Reyes looked at Adrian. Adrian looked at Reyes. And then Adrian said very quietly a name that Clara didn't recognize, Carla. We don't know that yet, Reyes said immediately. Who is Carla? Clara asked. My associate, Adrian said. The person I was meeting tonight. The one I said I'd been meeting at that location for 3 weeks. His voice had gone flat in a way that was different from his controlled pain flatness. This was the flatness of someone processing a specific and personal betrayal. She's been inside Vico's organization for 2 years. I flipped her 14 months ago. She's been feeding information to Reyes' team and feeding misinformation back to Vico. You think she's been working both sides, Clara said. I think, Adrian said carefully, that 3 weeks ago something changed for her, and I didn't see it. He was quiet for a moment. She has a daughter, 8 years old. Vico has used children before as leverage. His jaw tightened. If he found out about the daughter, then she's not a traitor, Clara said. She's a mother. Adrian looked at her. Something moved in his eyes. Yes, he said quietly. That's one way to see it. It's the only way to see it. Clara's voice was firm. Where is she now? Where is Carla? That's what my team is trying to determine, Reyes said. She's not at her registered address. Her phone has been dark since 10 p.m. She hesitated. There's a possibility that Vico has already. Don't, Adrian said. Reyes stopped. The three of them stood in the silence of that unfinished sentence. Clara became aware that Leo had muted the television and was watching them from the far bed with large, careful eyes. Children always knew. They always felt the temperature change in a room before adults admitted it. She walked over to him, sat on the edge of the bed. Hey, she said quietly. Is everything okay? He asked. We're working on it. That man, he glanced toward Adrian. He's hurt. He's going to be all right. Leo looked at her with David's eyes, that particular combination of intelligence and stubbornness that had been David's signature expression, the one that meant, I know you're not telling me everything, and I'm deciding whether to push. Mom, you said these people knew Dad. Yes. Did Dad work with them? Clara looked at her son, at this 9-year-old boy who had spent his entire conscious life with a father-shaped absence at the center of it, who had stopped asking, when is Daddy coming home, and started asking harder, quieter questions, the kind that didn't have simple answers. In a way, she said carefully, Dad was trying to do something important, something that was going to help a lot of people. And these people they're helping make sure that what Dad did wasn't for nothing. She held his gaze. Does that make sense? Leo considered this with the gravity he applied to important things. Like how if you plant something, someone else has to water it. Clara blinked. Yes, she said, exactly like that. He seemed to accept this. He leaned against her shoulder, the same gesture he'd made in the car, unconscious, incomplete, and turned the television volume back up. Ocean animals resumed their silent business. Clara stayed there for 30 seconds, just breathing him in. Then she stood and went back to Reyes. Carla's daughter, she said quietly. If Vico has the daughter as leverage, he's not going to hurt her. She's too useful, which means there's still time. Reyes looked at her. Time for what? To find Carla, to find the daughter, to give Carla a reason to come back to your side. Clara looked at her steadily. You have resources I don't, but I have something you don't have. What's that? I'm a mother who just made an impossible choice in the middle of the night for the same reason Carla did. She held Reyes' gaze. If you find her, let me talk to her first, before your people do, before she decides that cooperating with you is more dangerous than whatever Vico has offered her. Reyes studied her for a long, assessing moment. Then she looked at Adrian. Adrian said, she's right. Carla won't respond to official pressure. She'll shut down completely, but she might respond to, he glanced at Clara, to someone who understands the specific mathematics of protecting a child at any cost. I'll consider it, Reyes said, which from Reyes Clara was already learning was close to a yes. Reyes stepped into the bathroom to make calls. The click of the door was discreet and final. Clara and Adrian were alone, or as alone as two adults can be, with a 9-year-old 3 feet away watching television. You should let someone look at that wound properly, Clara said, nodding toward his side. The kid in the bathroom will do. When Reyes comes out, yes, a pause. Your son is remarkable. He gets it from his father. He gets some of it from his mother. Clara looked at him sideways. You're going to have to stop doing that. Doing what? Saying things that are designed to make me feel better about helping you. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then, that's not why I say them. Then why? Because they're true and because he stopped, started again more carefully. I spent 4 years keeping a promise to a man who trusted me. Keeping the promise meant keeping my distance from you, which was the right call strategically and personally extremely difficult. He looked at her directly. Your husband talked about you the way people only talk about someone when they've made their whole life around that person. It was, he paused, clarifying for a man like me, who had not made his life around anything worth keeping. Clara looked at the wall. Adrian, yes. Don't make me feel sorry for you. I have a very limited supply of sympathy tonight, and I need most of it for myself. Despite everything, he almost smiled. Fair. The bathroom door opened and Reyes came back in with her phone in her hand and an expression that had shifted into something operational and fast. We found Carla, she said. Clara stood up straight. Where? She's at a motel on the south side, alone or what looks like alone. No sign of the daughter. Reyes's voice was tight. One of my people spotted her car 40 minutes ago and has been sitting on the location. She hasn't moved. A pause. There's something else. What? She called Vico's main line an hour ago. The call lasted 4 minutes. We intercepted the audio. Reyes looked at her phone. She told him where we are. The words landed like a dropped weight. She told him this location, Clara said. She told him the hotel name. Not the room number, she may not have had it, but the hotel name is enough. Reyes was already moving, already picking up the duffel from the closet. We have maybe 20 minutes before his people are in this parking structure. We need to go. Go where? I have a secondary location 40 minutes out. More secure. She handed Clara a dark jacket from the duffel. Put this on. It's cold. Clara took the jacket and turned to the bed. Leo, hey buddy, time to go. Leo looked up with the expression of a child who has decided that unusual things happening in the middle of the night are simply the current texture of life. Okay, he said. He turned the TV off. He put his shoes on. He did not complain. Clara felt a swell of love for him, so fierce it was almost painful. They were 4 minutes from the door when Reyes's phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen, stopped moving. What? Adrian said. Reyes looked up slowly. Carla just walked into a police precinct on the south side. A pause. Not a federal office. A city precinct. Another pause. She's asking to speak to the officer in charge of the Moretti investigation. Adrian's face went through several things in rapid succession. Which precinct? The 9th. The silence that followed was the specific silence of a room full of people who have just understood something bad simultaneously. The 9th precinct, Clara said slowly. Is that one of the ones with Vico's people inside? Reyes's voice was careful and exact. We don't know which of the 2 compromised officers is stationed where, but it might be. Yes. So Clara worked it through. Carla thinks she's turning herself in to neutral authorities, but she might be walking directly into Vico's hands. Yes. And her daughter, we still don't know where the daughter is. Leo was standing beside Clara with his jacket half zipped, watching her face. She put her hand on his shoulder without looking down. Felt him lean into it. We have to get to Carla before whoever is in that precinct makes a call, Clara said. My team is moving. How fast? A beat. 20 minutes minimum. Is 20 minutes enough? Reyes looked at her phone, looked at Clara. I don't know. Clara thought about a woman in a police precinct at 3 in the morning alone, believing she was surrendering to safety, not knowing the room might already be compromised. She thought about an 8-year-old girl somewhere in this city, which was enormous and dark and full of men who understood the specific leverage of a child. She thought about David handing over an evidence file to a man he barely knew, because there was no one else and the window was closing and something had to survive. She thought about what it meant when the only person close enough to matter was someone nobody expected. "Give me the burner phone," Clara said. Reyes frowned. "Why, Chumam?" "Because I'm going to call the 9th Precinct and ask for Carla by name and tell her in front of whoever's listening that her daughter is safe and being moved to federal protection right now." She held Reyes's gaze. Even if the daughter isn't yet, the moment Carla believes her daughter is safe, Vico loses his leverage. And the moment Vico loses his leverage, Carla has no reason to protect him anymore. The room was very quiet. "You're going to bluff," Reyes said. "I'm going to give her a reason to hold on for 20 minutes until your people get there." Clara put her hand out. "The phone." Reyes looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at Adrian. Adrian said, "Give her the phone." Reyes put the burner in Clara's hand. Clara dialed the 9th Precinct. It rang twice. A desk sergeant answered the specific bored alert tone of a cop on the overnight shift. "9th Precinct. My name is Clara Martinez," she said. "I'm calling for a woman named Carla who just walked into your station. I need to speak with her. It's urgent, and it concerns Federal Case Matter 77 Alpha, and she will know what that means." She had invented the case number entirely. She said it with the absolute confidence of someone who had not invented it. A pause, shuffling, muffled voices. Then a woman's voice on the line, scared thin, trying to control itself. "Hello? Carla." Clara's voice dropped warm and direct. "My name is Clara. I'm working with Agent Reyes. I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you not to react visibly to what I'm about to tell you, because there may be someone in that room who is reporting to Vico." A sharp intake of breath, then silence, then very quietly. "Okay. Your daughter is safe. She is being moved to a secure location right now. Federal protection. She is not in Vico's hands." Clara paused to let that land. "I need you to stay exactly where you are. Stay calm and give us 18 minutes. Agent Reyes's people are coming to you personally. Do not sign anything. Do not make any additional calls, and do not let anyone move you to a different room." "Can you do that?" A silence that lasted about 5 full seconds. Clara could hear Carla breathing ragged and fast, a woman coming apart at the seams in a police precinct at 3 in the morning. Then Carla said, "Is she really safe?" Clara closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. "Yes," she said, "she is." Another silence. Then, okay, 18 minutes. 18 minutes, Clara confirmed. "You're doing the right thing." She ended the call, looked at Reyes. "Find the daughter, right now. I just told her she was safe." Reyes was already on her own phone. "I heard." She turned away, speaking rapidly. "I need a locate on a minor, 8 years old, connected to a Carla last name, Vasquez. I need it in the next 15 minutes. Pull every resource." Adrian looked at Clara across the room. "You just told her the daughter was safe," he said quietly, without knowing. "Yes. If we can't find her in time, then I lied to save her mother's life in a compromised police station, and we'll deal with the consequences of that later." Clara's voice was steady. "Right now we need to move, and we need to find that little girl. In that order." Leo, who had been standing very still through all of this, looked up at his mother and said, "Mom, you sound like Dad." Clara looked down at her son. She had not expected that, had not been prepared for it. It went through her like something bright and terrible and completely undeserved. She crouched down to his level there, in the anonymous hotel room at 3 in the morning, with a federal agent on the phone and a wounded Moretti on the sofa, and the clock running on 18 minutes, and she cupped her son's face in both hands. "Yeah," she managed. "Yeah," he was completely serious. "You do." She kissed his forehead, stood up, turned back to the room. "Let's go find this little girl," she said. Reyes drove fast without appearing to drive fast, the particular skill of someone trained to move urgently without attracting attention. Clara sat in the back with Leo pressed against her left side and the burner phone in her right hand, watching the minutes tick down. 14 minutes left on the promise she'd made to Carla. 14 minutes before a woman in a compromised police precinct either held her nerve or came apart, and the difference between those two outcomes was a little girl nobody had found yet. "Talk to me," Clara said to Reyes. "Where are we on the daughter?" My team is running the last known address for Carla Vasquez. Apartment on Meridian, third floor. 2 agents are 6 minutes out. Reyes's voice was tight and operational. If the girl is there, we have her in 9 minutes. And if she's not there, a beat. Then we go to the secondary list. School contacts, family members, anyone Vico's people might have used to brief her. Reyes glanced in the rearview mirror. Clara, you bought us time. Let us use it. Clara nodded, looked down at Leo, who had his eyes closed but was not asleep. She could tell by the particular stillness of him, the held breath quality that meant he was listening to everything and processing in that quiet, thorough way that was entirely David. You okay? She murmured. Mm-hmm. A pause. Is that girl going to be all right? We're going to make sure of it. He was quiet for a moment. Then good. And he leaned a fraction heavier against her, which was his version of approval. Adrian was in the front passenger seat with his arm braced against his side, and Clara had been monitoring his breathing without appearing to do so for the past 10 minutes. It was controlled still, but shallower than it had been in the hotel room. The wound was not critical, he'd said, but a not critical wound that went unaddressed long enough had a way of renegotiating its own terms. Adrian, she said, I'm fine. You're breathing like someone who is working very hard to be fine. It's not the same thing. He turned his head slightly toward the window. When we reach the secondary location, I'll let Reyes's medical contact look at it properly. You'll let them look at it now if the bleeding's worsened. Clara, I'm not asking. She said it the way she said things to Leo when the discussion was finished. There was a brief silence from the front seat, and then remarkably, Adrian Moretti said nothing further. Reyes's phone buzzed. She took it off the dash and looked at the screen at a red light, and her expression shifted in a way that Clara had already learned to read, the slight tightening around the eyes, the breath held for exactly 1 second. What? Clara said. Meridian apartment empty. Signs of recent occupation, food on the counter, child's backpack still there. They left in a hurry. Reyes set the phone back down. The girl wasn't there. The car moved through the green light. Nobody spoke for 5 seconds. Secondary list, Clara said, running it now. How many minutes on the Carla clock? 11. 11 minutes. Clara pressed her hand flat against her thigh and thought. Carla had called Vico an hour ago and given him the hotel name. That meant an hour ago she had still been operating under his leverage. Something had changed, or she had broken, because she'd then walked into a police station alone. People didn't walk into police stations alone at 3 in the morning unless they had reached the absolute end of whatever rope they'd been holding, which meant the leverage had either been lifted or Carla had decided the leverage didn't matter anymore. And the only way leverage over a mother stopped mattering was if the mother had stopped believing her child was reachable. Reyes, Clara said, is it possible Vico moved the girl before Carla went to the precinct, not as ongoing leverage but already gone, to make Carla feel like there was nothing left to protect? Reyes's hands tightened on the wheel. A fractional thing. That's a significant escalation even for Vico. He's 6 weeks from a grand jury and running out of moves. Is it outside his range? A long pause. Adrian said quietly from the front seat, no, it's not outside his range. His voice had something in it that Clara recognized as specific knowledge, the kind that came from proximity and history, the kind that cost something to carry. When Vico feels the walls closing, he eliminates variables. He doesn't negotiate, he simplifies. He paused. If he moved the girl, it wasn't to keep leverage. It was to remove Carla as a functioning person. Someone who has nothing left to lose is unpredictable. And someone who has nothing left to lose walked into a police station, Clara said. The car was silent. We have to find that girl, Clara said. Not to use her as leverage back, not for the case, because she's 8 years old and she's alone somewhere in this city, and where her mother is sitting in a precinct right now trying to hold it together for 11 more minutes. Her voice was steady and absolute. That's the only reason. Reyes's phone buzzed again. She grabbed it, read. Family contact maternal grandmother, Dolores Vasquez, apartment on Garfield. My team is checking it now. How long? 4 minutes. We have 7 left on the clock. I know. Leo opened his eyes. He didn't say anything. He just looked at his mother's face and then looked at the back of Reyes's head and then looked at Adrian and then he closed his eyes again. Clara felt him breathe slow and deliberate, the way she had taught him to breathe when he was scared, the technique she'd read about in a parenting book the year after David died, when she was looking for anything that might help an anxious 5-year-old sleep. He had remembered it. At 9 years old, in the back of a federal agent's car at 3 in the morning, he was using it. She pressed her lips together and looked out the window. Reyes's phone buzzed. She looked again. Then she exhaled a specific controlled exhale that Clara recognized as the sound of someone standing down from a level of tension they had been holding without showing. The grandmother's apartment, Reyes said. 2 men outside, 1 inside. A pause. My team has eyes on the building. The men outside match the description of 2 known Moretti associates. Another pause. A light is on in the apartment, 3rd floor. The girl's in there, Clara said. It wasn't a question. We believe so. What's your team going to do? Coordinate with, Reyes stopped. Coordinate with law enforcement. The pause before law enforcement was slight, but Clara caught it. With which law enforcement? Clara said. Uniformed response will tip Vico's men. They'll move before your team can get to the apartment. I'm aware of that. Duh. What are the options? My team goes in alone, 3 agents against 2 confirmed Moretti associates, 1 unknown inside. Reyes's jaw was set. It's not ideal, but it's what we have. How long before your team is in position? They're in position now. They're waiting on my authorization. Clara did not hesitate. Authorize them. Mrs. Martinez, authorize them. Every minute that girl sits in that apartment, it is a minute Vico's people have to decide she's become a liability rather than an asset. She held Reyes's eyes in the rearview mirror. You know I'm right. 3 seconds. 4. Reyes picked up the phone. Go, she said. Soft entry, 3rd floor, prioritize the minor. I want confirmation in 4 minutes. She put the phone down. If this goes wrong, it's not going to go wrong, Clara said with a certainty she did not entirely feel, but projected with everything she had, the way you project certainty for children and for people who need to believe something is possible long enough to make it true. 6 minutes passed in the kind of silence that has weight and texture. The city moved past the windows. Leo breathed slowly. Adrian did not speak. Reyes kept both hands on the wheel and her eyes on the road and her phone on the dash, where she could see the screen without looking away from traffic. The phone lit up. Reyes looked at it for 1 second. Then she said, They have her. The girl is safe. The breath that came out of Clara was not elegant. It was not composed. It was the breath of someone who had been holding something enormous without knowing how enormous it was until the moment they could put it down. Okay, she said. Her voice was rough. Okay. Leo opened his eyes, looked at her face. The girl is okay. She's okay. He nodded once solemnly, as if confirming something he had already decided. Then he settled back against her shoulder and closed his eyes again. Reyes picked up the phone, called the 9th precinct, spoke in rapid, clipped sentences that Clara only half heard because she was busy putting herself back together from the inside out. She heard Reyes say confirmed, safe maternal grandmother's location, federal custody, and then the call ended and Reyes exhaled once through her nose and drove. Carla, Clara said, being transferred to a federal protective custody as of 3 minutes from now. My people are at the precinct. A pause. She didn't give up anything critical while she was in there. The desk sergeant who received her, we don't know yet if he's one of Vico's people, but if he is, all he got was a frightened woman asking for help. And the grandmother, was she? She didn't know. Vico's men told her Carla had sent them. They told her they were friends helping to keep the girl safe. Reyes's voice was flat. She's 81 years old. She let them in because they were polite and she trusted her granddaughter's name. Clara thought about an 81-year-old woman opening her door to men she didn't know because they spoke her granddaughter's name. She thought about all the ways trust got weaponized by people who had no use for it except as a tool. Is the grandmother all right? Shaken, physically fine. A pause. My team is with her. The car pulled into a residential area Clara didn't recognize, smaller streets. Older buildings, the kind of neighborhood that had been a different version of itself 2 decades ago and still carried the memory. Reyes pulled into an underground parking structure, navigated 2 levels down, and pulled into a space near a gray door marked with a number Clara couldn't read in the dark. Secondary safe house, Reyes said. This one's clean. Nobody's been in or out for 3 weeks. She turned the engine off, looked at Clara in the mirror. We're going to be here for a while. The operation moves to its next phase in about 6 hours. I need you to rest if you can. What happens in 6 hours? The prosecutor is filing an emergency motion to accelerate the grand jury timeline. Given tonight's events, Adrian's exposure, the secondary safe house, the Vasquez situation, we have grounds to argue that waiting 6 weeks creates unacceptable risk to witnesses and evidence integrity. She paused. If the judge agrees, we could have a grand jury convened in 5 days. 5 days, Clara said. It's in 5 days. She looked at Adrian. He was looking at his hands, large, still hands resting on his knees, the hands of a man who had held something very heavy for a very long time and was beginning to understand that the weight was about to shift. And if the judge doesn't agree, she said, then we go back to 6 weeks and spend every one of those days keeping everyone in this car alive. Reyes opened the door, one problem at a time. The safe house was larger than the hotel, a proper apartment, 3 bedrooms, the kind of anonymous functional space that had clearly been furnished by someone with a government budget and no emotional investment in comfort. There was food in the refrigerator. There were clean blankets. There was a small room with a single bed that Reyes pointed Leo toward, and Leo went without argument, which told Clara exactly how exhausted he was. She sat with him until his breathing evened out, which took about 4 minutes. Then she stood, pulled the blanket up, and stood in the doorway looking at him for a moment longer than she needed to. He had David's eyelashes. She had always noticed that from the very beginning. She went back to the main room. Reyes was at the table with the laptop open, typing fast. Adrian was on the sofa with his coat finally off, and a man Clara hadn't seen before, middle-aged, serious, the careful hands of someone with medical training, was examining the wound with a small flashlight. Through and through, as he said, the man said without looking up. Clean, no major vessel involvement. He's going to be very sore for about 2 weeks, but he'll live. Good, Clara said. She sat down across from Adrian and looked at him directly. He looked back. The medical man worked quietly between them. There's something you haven't told me, Clara said. Adrian was quiet for a moment. There are probably several things. The one that matters most. He held her gaze. The medical man cleaned the wound and pretended to be completely absorbed in his work, which was professional of him. Vico knows about this location, Adrian said. Not this one specifically, but the network of federal safe houses in this city. He has a partial map, information from the first 18 months of the task force investigation before the counterintelligence protocols were tightened. He paused. Reyes is confident this specific apartment is outside his knowledge. I'm 90% confident she's right. What's in the other 10%? The possibility that someone updated his map more recently than we know. He held her gaze steadily. I want you to know because you're not a person who does well with partial information. And because you deserve to make an informed decision about whether you and Leo stay here or go somewhere else. Clara looked at him. If I move Leo again tonight, he's going to know something is seriously wrong. He's already holding himself together with both hands because he has David's instincts and he can feel the tension in every room we've been in. One more move in the dark, at 4 a.m, it breaks the story I've been telling him. She paused. The story is we're okay, we're being careful, the people helping us know what they're doing. If that story breaks, I've got a 9-year-old in full panic and I've got nothing left to manage him with because I've used everything I have already tonight. Adrian was quiet. 90%, Clara said. I can live with 90%. All right, the medical man finished, packed his kit, nodded at Adrian, nodded at Clara, and left the room with the same quiet efficiency with which he'd arrived. Reyes looked up from the laptop. I need to tell you both something about tomorrow. Tell us, Clara said. The prosecutor wants to meet with you directly. Both of you together, which is unusual and which she specifically requested. Reyes folded her hands on the table. Her name is Ellen Park. She's been on this case for 2 years. She is very good and she is very direct, and she is going to ask you, Clara, to formally agree to testify. Not just consider it, formally agree with your name on a document which commits you and also officially places you under federal protection. With all the complications that brings, Clara Parham said. Yes, new identity protocols for the duration. Leo's school situation changes. Your job. Reyes paused. Rosie's diner becomes complicated for a while. Clara thought about Marge, about the counter she had wiped down 11,000 times, about the way the diner smelled at midnight coffee and grease, and the specific exhaustion of people who worked hard and expected nothing from the world except a hot meal and a brief rest. What about Rosa? She said, my sister. We'll have a conversation with her. She'll be briefed at a level appropriate to her involvement. She won't be in danger if she cooperates with the protocol. Reyes paused. She'll be upset. She's always upset with me, Clara said. This will be consistent. And then Reyes's laptop made a sound, not a notification sound, a different sound, the sound of an incoming connection, sharp and unscheduled. Reyes's head turned toward it fast. She read the screen. She read it again. What? Adrian said. Reyes turned the laptop so they could both see. Clara leaned forward. It was an intercepted communication, she could tell by the header formatting, and it had been flagged and routed to Reyes's secure connection within the last 60 seconds. It was a message from Vico Moretti's internal communication system to 3 separate recipients. Clara read it twice. Then she sat back. He knows the grand jury is being accelerated, she said. Yes. How? That's what I'm trying to determine. Reyes' voice was controlled, but the speed of her typing had increased. This communication was sent 11 minutes ago. The acceleration motion hasn't been filed yet. The only people who knew about it were in this car tonight. She looked up. In Ellen Park. The room was very still. You're not saying Park, Adrian started. I'm not saying anything yet, Reyes said. I'm saying the information moved faster than it should have. That's all I know. She turned back to the laptop. I'm going to find the pathway. It will take me 20 minutes. What does the message say he's going to do? Claire asked. Reyes looked at her, a long, careful look. He's not running, she said. He's not leaving the city. He's not trying to destroy evidence or move money. She paused. He's consolidating. He's calling in every person who owes him something, every favor, every threat. He's building something. Building what? The message uses the word finale. Reyes held her gaze. Vico Moretti has decided that if the walls are coming down regardless, he is going to choose the circumstances under which they fall. Clara looked at Adrian. Adrian looked at the wall. He's going to make a move on the case directly, Adrian said quietly. Not the evidence that's out of his reach now. Not the witnesses individually too slow, too many. He paused. He's going to go for the central point. The thing that if it falls, takes everything else with it. Which is what Clara said. The silence lasted 3 full seconds. Me, Adrian said, if you don't testify, if I can't testify, there's a difference. He looked at her steadily. I'm the connective tissue of this case. I'm the one who was inside who can link the evidence to the people who can put Vico specifically at the center. The documentation David collected is powerful, but documentation without someone to authenticate it and contextualize it for a jury is circumstantial. I'm the context, he paused. Vico knows this. Then we protect you, Clara said. That's what Reyes has limited resources and a task force with a potential second leak and 6 hours until a filing that may or may not succeed. Adrian's voice was not fatalistic, it was factual. I'm not saying this to frighten you. I'm saying it because you asked, and you're someone who needs the full truth. Clara stood up, walked to the window, looked at the dark outside, the particular 4 a.m. dark that was close to the darkest part of night, the part just before anything started to get lighter. She thought about David in a room somewhere, handing over evidence, saying, I need someone to make sure it meant something. She thought about what that room had felt like, what the air had been like in that room, the quality of the choice, the loneliness of it. She had never been able to imagine it clearly enough to satisfy herself. Now standing in a federal safe house at 4 a.m. with the same weight in her own hands, she thought she understood it better. She turned around. Then we don't give him the 6 hours, she said. Reyes looked up from the laptop. The motion to accelerate it doesn't get filed in 6 hours through official channels which can be monitored and leaked and delayed. Clara looked at Reyes steadily. You said Ellen Park is good. You said she's direct. Can she move tonight, not at 9 a.m. tonight? Emergency filing. Is there a judge on call for federal matters? Reyes was quiet for a moment. There's an emergency federal docket. It's used for imminent danger situations. A pause. What happened tonight arguably qualifies. Then call Park. Now, tell her what we know about Vico's message. Tell her the timeline needs to move up, not by hours, by days. Clara looked at Adrian. Every hour we wait is an hour Vico spends building his finale. We don't wait for him to finish building it. Adrian looked at her. That look again, the same one from the alley, from the storage room, from every moment in this long, impossible night where she had done the thing that nobody expected her to do. You're not what I expected, he said quietly. Nobody is in the middle of the night, Clara said. Call Park Reyes. Reyes looked at them both. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. While Reyes talked in rapid clipped sentences at the far end of the room, Clara sat back down across from Adrian. The apartment was quiet except for Reyes's voice and the ambient hum of a city that did not know and did not care what was happening inside this building. The letter, Clara said. Adrian looked at her. You said earlier in the alley, you've been watching me for 6 months, trying to figure out how to approach me. She held his gaze. Was there a letter, something you were going to send or give me, or... He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of the coat that was folded on the sofa beside him. He produced an envelope, cream-colored, heavy paper. Her name on the front in handwriting she did not recognize. He held it out. She took it. David wrote it, Adrian said. The night he gave me the evidence. He said if something happens, give this to her when it's over. When she's safe, when it's done. He held her gaze. It's not over yet. It's not done, but you're here and you're part of this now, and I think he would have wanted you to have it before the worst of it, not after. Clara held the envelope. It was light, 1 page, maybe 2, 4 years old, her husband's handwriting on the front. She did not open it. Not here, not now, not in front of Adrian, not with Reyes on the phone 12 feet away, not when Leo was asleep in the next room, and her hands were still unsteady from everything the night had already demanded of them. She put the envelope inside her jacket, against her chest. Thank you, she said. Reyes ended the call and turned around. Her face had the look of someone who has just had a door open that they weren't entirely sure would open. Park is moving, she said. Emergency filing 2 hours from now. She needs Adrian's formal declaration on record before dawn, a written statement assigned that goes into the filing as evidence of imminent witness endangerment. She looked at Adrian. Can you do that? Yes. She also needs something from you, Clara. Reyes paused. Your formal agreement to testify on record before the filing. Your presence in this, what happened tonight, what you did with Carla, it becomes part of the argument for the emergency acceleration. A civilian witness drawn into active danger. A child in the same vehicle as a federal target. She met Clara's eyes. You become part of the reason the judge says yes. Clara thought about Leo sleeping in the next room with his father's eyelashes and his mother's nerve. She thought about an envelope resting against her heart. She thought about Carla in federal custody and a little girl who was going to wake up tomorrow, not knowing how close the night had come. She thought about David, who had made his choice in a room she would never see and trusted a man she would never have trusted because the alternative was letting something important die unwitnessed. Get me the paperwork, Clara said. Reyes reached into the duffel, pulled out a folder paper again, the real kind, the kind that existed on no server. Set it on the table in front of Clara. Clara opened it, read the first page, read it again, picked up the pen that Reyes set beside the folder and felt the specific gravity of the moment, the way certain instants know they are permanent before you commit to them, the way the air in a room changes around a decision that cannot be unmade. She thought about David one more time, not sadly, not with grief, with something cleaner than grief, something that felt for the first time in 4 years like forward motion. She signed her name. The pen was still in Clara's hand when Reyes' phone rang, not buzzed. Rang full volume, which meant Reyes had changed the setting sometime in the last hour, which meant she was expecting a call she needed to hear immediately and from across a room. She grabbed it on the first ring and turned away, and Clara watched her shoulders change shape, the way shoulders do when news arrives that reorganizes everything. Adrian watched Reyes too. He had been signing his own statement, 3 pages careful and precise, the handwriting of a man who understood that these words were going to be read by a federal judge in approximately 90 minutes and needed to be unambiguous. His pen stopped moving. Reyes turned back around. Her face was composed in the specific way of someone who has trained themselves not to show fear and is currently using every bit of that training. "Talk to us," Adrian said. "That was my surveillance team on Vico's primary residence." She set the phone down on the table with more care than the gesture required. "He's gone." Clara heard the words, processed them. Gone as in left. An hour ago, possibly more. The residence is empty. His personal security detail, 4 men who have been stationed at that property for 3 years without a single overnight absence, all 4 are gone. Reyes's voice was steady and terrible. His personal vehicle, 2 others registered to Moretti shell companies, a boat registered to a third party with known Moretti connections, all gone. "He's running," Clara said. "Or he's moving," Adrian said. And the distinction in his voice, the specific weight he put on moving versus running, made the hair on Clara's arms stand up. "What's the difference?" Clara said, though some part of her already knew. "A man who runs is frightened." Adrian set his pen down. "Vico is not frightened. He's never been frightened. If he's moving, he's decided on a specific action, and he is moving to execute it." He looked at Reyes. The word in his message, finale. "You said he was building something." "I said he was consolidating." "Where does he consolidate?" Adrian's voice was quiet and precise. "When Vico has decided something is ending on his terms, where does he go?" Reyes and Adrian looked at each other across the table, and Clara watched the specific horror of shared knowledge pass between 2 people who had been inside the same world long enough to understand its geometry. "The warehouse on Delancey," Reyes said. "Yes. We have had that property under passive surveillance for 14 months. Nothing has ever, because he has never needed it before." Adrian stood up slowly, bracing against the table. "It's where his father went in 1987 when the Caruso family moved against them. It's where Vico went when he was 17 and the building was raided the first time. It's not a location he uses. It's a location he returns to." He looked at Reyes steadily. "It's where the Moretti family goes to make final decisions." The room was absolutely silent. Clara said, "Then that's where he is right now." "Possibly." "Not possibly." She stood up. "You just said it. He's not running. He's executing. He's gone to the place where final decisions get made. He's called in every person who owes him something, and he's building his finale." She looked at Reyes. "How far is Delancey from here?" 18 minutes. "And your tactical team, the ones who got the girl at the grandmother's apartment, they're 12 minutes from Delancey." "Then call them." "Clara," Reyes's voice was careful. "A tactical operation against Vico Moretti in an uncontrolled location with incomplete intelligence on how many personnel he's consolidated at 4:30 in the morning, that's not a decision I make alone, and it's not a decision I make in 5 minutes. How long does it take to make that decision?" "The authorization chain is Reyes." Clara put both hands flat on the table and looked at the woman directly. "You told me an hour ago that Vico had decided the walls were coming down and he was going to choose the circumstances. I'm telling you right now that if we wait for the authorization chain, he finishes choosing. And we don't get to choose at all." She held her gaze. "The emergency filing goes in front of a judge in 90 minutes. If Vico is apprehended before that filing lands, the judge doesn't just accelerate the timeline. The timeline becomes irrelevant because the defendant is in custody. Everything David collected, everything Adrian built, everything Carla and Frank Okafor have been carrying, it all goes to trial on the strongest possible footing. And if the operation goes wrong, what does Vico do if we leave him alone for 90 minutes to finish building whatever he's building?" Clara said. "Tell me that. Tell me what he does, and I'll sit down and wait." Reyes looked at her, looked at Adrian. Adrian gave the smallest possible nod. Not an endorsement, not a push, just an acknowledgement that Clara's arithmetic was correct. Reyes picked up the phone. She made 3 calls in 8 minutes. Clara listened to the shape of them without following every word, the cadence of someone moving up an authorization chain, fast compressing arguments, using the specific language of controlled urgency that gets doors opened at 4:30 in the morning. By the third call, her voice had changed, more formal, more precise, the voice of someone speaking to someone whose approval mattered. She ended the third call. Set the phone down. We have a 20-minute window, she said. My team moves on Delancey in 6 minutes. If Vico is there, they take him. If the location is empty or the situation is uncontrollable, they pull back and we go back to the filing. She looked at Clara. You, Leo, and Adrian stay here. Locked-in agent outside the door. Nobody moves until I call. Understood, Clara said. Reyes pulled on her jacket, checked her sidearm with the brief, practiced efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. Looked at Clara one more time, and in that look was something that hadn't been there at the beginning of the night, something that wasn't quite warmth, because Reyes was not built for warmth in operational hours, but was close to respect. Lock the door behind me, she said. She left. The door clicked. Silence settled over the apartment like something physical. Adrian lowered himself back onto the sofa. The medical man's bandaging held, but the night had cost him. Clara could see it in the gray around his eyes, the deliberate economy of every movement. You should sleep, she said, shortly. He looked at her. You should read the letter. She had forgotten she was still wearing it, the envelope tucked inside her jacket resting against her sternum, her husband's handwriting on the front. She had not forgotten it the way you forget things. She had been carrying it the way you carry something you are not ready for, yet keeping it close enough to reach and far enough not to have to. Not yet, she said. Clara, when it's done. She sat down. When Reyes calls, when I know what the call says. She looked at him steadily. I'm not going to read my husband's last words to me in a gap between things. I'm going to read them when I have the space to let them be what they are. Adrian held her gaze. Then he nodded once. All right. They sat in the quiet of 4:40 in the morning and waited. Clara had spent a lot of her life waiting for David to come home, waiting for news from a hospital, waiting for grief to stop being the first thing she felt in the morning and the last thing at night. She had gotten good at waiting in the way that people get good at things they hate, not comfortably, but competently. Hands folded, breathing even, mind elsewhere. Her mind tonight would not go elsewhere. It kept returning to Vico Moretti in a warehouse on Delancey Street, assembling his finale, which could mean 100 things, none of them good. It kept returning to a tactical team in 12 vehicles or 6 vehicles or however many vehicles converging on a dark building. It kept returning to the envelope against her chest. 12 minutes after Reyes left, Leo appeared in the bedroom doorway. He was barefoot and his hair was sideways, and he was wearing the expression of someone who has woken up in an unfamiliar place and is performing a rapid assessment of whether to be scared. He looked at Clara. He looked at Adrian. He looked at the locked front door. Where did the woman go? He said. To work, Clara said, at 5 in the morning. She works unusual hours. Leo processed this with the suspicious thoroughness of a 9-year-old who has been lied to by well-meaning adults enough times to know the shape of it. He came into the room and sat down beside Clara without being invited, which was his way. He did not ask for permission to be close to his mother. He simply arrived like weather. Adrian, shit him, he said. Adrian looked at him. Yes? Did you know my dad well? The question landed softly. The question hit like a stone. Clara stayed very still. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Not the hesitation of someone constructing a lie, the quiet of someone deciding how much truth a 9-year-old could hold. I knew him for about 2 years, he said, the way friends know each other. We were in a complicated situation together, but in 2 years, even in complicated situations, you learn who a person is. He met Leo's eyes directly, man to boy, no softening. Your father was the kind of person who, when everything was dangerous and uncertain, and he had every reason to think only about himself, thought about other people instead. That's rare. I want you to know that's genuinely rare. Leo looked at him for a long moment. He thought about us, he said. Not a question. Every day, Adrian said, without exception. Leo nodded slowly. He leaned against Clara's shoulder and was quiet. Clara put her arm around him and stared at the middle distance and did not trust herself to speak. Then Clara's burner phone buzzed on the table. She grabbed it before the second buzz. Reyes. Talk, Clara said. He's there. Reyes' voice was low and fast, the compressed urgency of someone speaking from a position where sound was dangerous. Vico is in the building. We have confirmed visual. 7 additional individuals, 4 known Moretti associates, 3 unknowns. A pause. My team is in position. We go in 4 minutes. Clara's hand tightened on the phone. What's he doing? What does the finale look like? He has a fractional hesitation. He has the prosecutor. The room went cold. He has Ellen Park, Clara said. She was taken from her home approximately 90 minutes ago. We didn't know she lives alone. She wasn't flagged for protection at the same level as the witnesses because she's a prosecutor, because she's... Reyes's voice tightened. Because we miscalculated. My team is going in. We have confirmation she's inside and unharmed. He's using her as leverage to negotiate a deal. He's been trying to reach the U.S. Attorney's Office for the past hour, threatening to... She stopped. Clara, stay where you are. We have this. What deal? Clara said. What does he want? Adrian. Reyes's voice was flat and final. He wants Adrian in exchange for Park. He wants to walk out of that building with his brother, and he wants the case to go away. A pause. He knows it can't work. He's not stupid. I think he knows this ends tonight regardless. But he wants to be the one who decides how. Clara looked at Adrian. Adrian had heard. She could see in his face that he had heard everything. The phone wasn't on speaker, but the room was quiet and Reyes's voice was carrying, and Adrian Moretti had the hearing of a man who had spent decades in rooms where the most important things were said quietly. Tell her, Adrian said. He was looking at Clara, not at the phone. Tell Reyes I'm coming in. You're not, Clara started. Tell her. He was already reaching for his coat. Vico took a federal prosecutor. My team going in hot with Vico holding Park means she's in crossfire. The moment he sees Tactical approaching, he panics, or he doesn't, and with Vico, I genuinely don't know which. But he won't panic if he sees me. He held Clara's gaze. He'll never believe he has leverage if I walk in through the front door voluntarily. He'll know it's over. Vico understands power. He understands when someone is choosing surrender and when they're choosing the terms. He'll kill you, Clara said. He won't. Adrian said it with a certainty that was not bravado. It was the specific confidence of someone who knew a particular person well enough to map their behavior. Vico needs me alive to negotiate. The moment I'm in that building, Park is no longer useful to him. He'll release her to demonstrate good faith in the negotiation. He paused. And the moment Park is out of that building, Reyes's team goes in. Clara stared at him. You're using yourself as bait. I'm using myself as a distraction. There's a difference. He almost smiled. It was a strange, tired, genuine thing. I've been doing this for 3 years. I know how to stay alive in a room with my brother. He stood up slowly, hand pressed to his side. Tell Reyes. Clara looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she put the phone to her ear. Reyes, Adrian is coming to you. Don't shoot him when he arrives. A silence on the line. Clara, that is not. He's right, and you know it, Clara said. Get Park out. Take Vico. Let Adrian be the reason it works. She paused. He's David's promise walking into that building. Let him finish it. Another silence. Shorter. 12 minutes, Reyes said. I need him in position in 12 minutes. He'll be there. Clara ended the call. Leo was looking at Adrian with those large, serious eyes. You're going to do something dangerous, he said. I'm going to do something necessary, Adrian said. Sometimes they're the same thing. My dad thought that too, Leo said. Mom told me. Adrian looked at the mom, something in his face, not sentiment, not performance, something real and unguarded. Your dad was smarter than me, he said quietly, but I'm going to try to be worthy of the comparison. He picked up his sign and statement from the table, folded it, put it in his coat pocket, looked at Clara. She reached out and straightened his collar, an instinct, a reflex, the gesture of someone who has spent years making sure the people they love look like themselves before they walk out the door. She did it before she thought about doing it, and when she realized what she'd done, she didn't take it back. Come back, she said, simply, directly, the way you say the things that matter. Yes, he said, and he left. The next 47 minutes were the longest of Clara's life, which was a meaningful statement given the competition. She sat on the sofa with Leo, who had migrated fully into her lap despite being technically too large for that configuration, and she held him, and she did not look at the clock more than once every 3 minutes. She had set a rule for herself once every 3 minutes. She kept the rule. Leo fell asleep again around minute 20. His weight in her lap was the only thing keeping her from coming apart at the seams. She reached inside her jacket, took out the envelope, held it, David's handwriting on the front. Just her name, Clara, in the particular way he'd always written it, the C slightly larger than it needed to be, a habit he'd had since she'd pointed it out to him in the first year of their marriage, and he'd said he'd try to change it and never had. She opened it. One page. Both sides. His handwriting compressed and careful. He had written this, knowing the space was limited, knowing he was not a man with unlimited time, knowing that whatever he put in this letter had to carry everything or it carried nothing. She read it. She read it twice. She will not share what it said, and it would be wrong to try to report it here. Some things belong only to the people they were written for. What she will share, what she allowed later to be known, was this: David had not apologized. He had not explained. He had not justified. He had written to her about what she was specifically, precisely in the way only someone who has loved a person thoroughly can write about them. He had written about Leo with the particularity of a man who had memorized his son in advance of a future he was afraid he wouldn't see. And at the very end, he had written 3 sentences that she folded into herself and kept. She was still sitting with the letter in her hands when the burner phone rang. She answered before the first ring finished. "It's done," Reyes said. Clara closed her eyes. "Vico. In custody. Federal agents took him 11 minutes ago. He is alive, uninjured, and very quiet." A pause. "Park is out, shaken, physically fine, angry, extremely angry, which is probably the healthiest response." Another pause. "Adrian walked into that building and said 4 words to his brother. We have the audio." "What 4 words? Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "David Martinez won Vico." And he stepped back. And that was when Vico put the gun down. Her voice was careful. "I don't know if that means something to you." Clara pressed her hand against the letter in her lap. "It means everything," she said. She sat there in the quiet with Leo sleeping across her, and the sky outside beginning to change, the first gray blue of early morning pressing in at the edges of the window, not quite dawn, but the promise of it, the stubborn, incremental return of light. An hour later, Reyes came back. She looked like someone who had run very hard and very far and had arrived and had a few minutes before the next thing. She sat down across from Clara and put both hands on the table and looked at them. "The filing went in 40 minutes ago," she said. "Emergency grand jury is convened in 3 days. Not 5-3. She looked up. The judge read the situation report and used the word unconscionable, which is not a word federal judges use in emergency proceedings. It was gratifying. "Adrian," Clara said, "being treated at a federal medical facility. The wound is fine. He's fine." Reyes paused. "He asked me to tell you, and I'm quoting him directly, tell her the job is done and she should sleep." He said that. He said that. The ghost of that almost smile crossed Reyes's face, and this time it stayed a half-second longer. "He also said something else, which was not for me, so I didn't listen to it, but it was written down and I have it here." She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. Clara picked it up, opened it. "For Leo, when he's ready, his father's badge number is 4471. The department has been holding his father's commendation medal since the investigation closed. It belongs to the boy. I'll make sure it gets to him. A.M.M." Clara folded the paper. She thought about a 9-year-old boy who planted seeds and understood that someone else had to water them. "Reyes," she said. "Yes." "What happens now?" "Practically, for me and Leo." Reyes settled back. 3 days of preparation before the grand jury. You'll meet with Ellen Park tomorrow today, technically in a few hours. You'll give your deposition. The identity protocols stay in place through the trial, which will be, she paused, probably 8 months, possibly longer. It will be disruptive. "I know. Your life will look different for a while." "It's been looking different for 4 years, Clara said. "At least now I know why." Reyes looked at her for a long moment. "You did something tonight that I could not have anticipated and could not have planned for," she said. "You made 3 or 4 decisions in real time without training or precedent that directly altered the outcome of this operation." She paused. "I want you to know that I know that. and that David Martinez apparently had excellent judgment in the people he loved. Clara looked at the letter still folded in her lap. Yes, she said, he did. The morning came the way mornings come after impossible nights, indifferent to what had happened in the dark, relentless in its ordinary arrival. Leo woke up and asked if there was anything to eat, which there was, and Clara made him toast and sat across from him at the small kitchen table and watched him eat with the focused enthusiasm of a 9-year-old for whom breakfast was currently the most important thing in the world. Mom, he said between bites. Yeah. Are we going to be okay? She looked at her son, at David's eyes in her son's face, at the boy who had slept in federal safe houses and ridden in government cars and accepted all of it with the magnificent, heartbreaking adaptability of children who trust their mothers completely. She thought about what she had signed her name to, what was coming in 3 days, 8 months of trial, the disruption, the protocol, the new shape of their life still unknown, still being assembled. She thought about David in a room with Adrian Moretti handing over everything he had, saying make sure it meant something. She thought about standing in a storage room at 2 a.m, making the worst possible decision, and how that decision made badly and impulsively, and out of something she couldn't have explained if she tried, had unraveled 4 years of silence and changed the direction of everything. She thought about an envelope, 3 sentences she was going to carry for the rest of her life. Yes, she said. She said it the way you say things you mean, without reservation, without qualification, without the hedging of someone who isn't sure. She said it the way David would have said it. We're going to be okay. Leo looked at her for a moment with those too old, too knowing eyes. Then he went back to his toast. And that was how it ended, not with a courtroom, not with a verdict, not with Vico Moretti's sentencing, or the commendation medal that arrived 6 weeks later, in a box with a handwritten note from Adrian, not with any of the official punctuation that the law would eventually provide. It ended at a kitchen table in the early morning, with a woman who had spent 4 years running from a truth she couldn't reach, and a boy eating toast in the quiet, unspectacular dawn of a day that was going to be ordinary in all the ways the night before had not been. It ended with a mother telling her son the truth and meaning every word. It ended with Clara Martinez, waitress widow, witnessed the woman her husband had always known she was finally completely irreversibly choosing to stay.